I think, like most parts of the world, Asia is facing a period of really what comes down to hyper-competitiveness, in the sense that we have an economy, the American economy, which has traditionally been a consumer of last resort, now looking like it's going into recession, if not technically, then certainly from every sort of practical standpoint. So from the point of view of essentially an important consumer disappearing from the marketplace, what that means is for most enterprises here in Asia is, particularly as we supply a lot to that market, it essentially means that internally we're going to have to rely more on our own internal market. So whether you're thinking about the Chinese market, which is becoming hyper-competitive, or whether you're looking at the Asia-Pacific as a whole, competition amongst Asian producers is much more acute than it was. So what does that mean for the CIO? And I think there's a couple of things that the CIOs now need to be much more cognizant of than perhaps historically. 2008, as far as Gartner is concerned, is the year when the CIO needs to make the difference to the way the enterprise competes, the way the enterprise makes its money. And what we mean by that is that information technology has the capability of changing the economics and changing the market reach of most enterprises. Now, if you're thinking of, if you're the CIO of a Chinese company based in China, an ex-state-owned enterprise, you probably have some basic automation to put in place first. But if you're a CIO of a company based here in Hong Kong or elsewhere in Asia, we've probably already done that. So what we're now looking at is, how do we improve the business processes that our parent organization is executing? How do we attract and retain more customers to that enterprise? How do we harness innovative ideas that information technology can bring to create new sources of essentially non-price competition? So I think it comes down to, for the CIO in this region, a chance to look out, or maybe a demand that they look outside of the enterprise. You can't just simply reduce costs anymore. This is a growth story. This is a making the difference story, and that, I think, is what's different in 2008 than perhaps has historically been the position for us here in this part of the world. Well, from the point of view of Asian CIOs, and particularly for CIOs in Hong Kong and the other developed economies in this region, some of those competitive changes that we're seeing in the marketplace really put a lot of pressure on the activities and capabilities that CIOs here need to develop. So in addition to getting the fundamentals right, what we're seeing this year is a much greater interest in fixing fundamental processes within IT. For example, there are techniques such as ITIL, which is a technique for running effective IT operations. Here in Asia, we're really seeing interest in ITIL, implementation of these techniques embodied in ITIL coming to the fore, much more important than we've seen in previous years. It's a recognition that you have to really get the fundamental infrastructure right. But in a sense, that's only the price of playing at the table. If you want to win in this game, there are some other things you need to do as well. Some of those things to do with engaging with customers, some of those things to do with developing superior analytic skills in terms of interpreting what's happening in the business and being able to change course as a result of that. And those skills often reside in IT. And that raises a number of major challenges for CIOs in this region, not least the human resource challenge. We're already challenged when it comes to basic skills, C++, Java skills, even basic skills like COBOL, for goodness sake. Those fundamental skills are already very difficult for us to find, even though we're able to utilize some very smart people across the border in mainland China. But we now need to look beyond that. We now are looking to hire people who have a very sophisticated level of business understanding, can understand business processes, can understand market analytics, can lead organizational change in their parent organization. In other words, it requires a definitional change in terms of the role of the CIO, from developing and delivering an application to delivering and developing business outcome, a business change. And what that means for most CIOs in this region is they need to recast the way they think about projects. If you think about a project delivering a piece of complex technology, an application, as being done when the application goes live, that really is only half the story. what we're looking at is really extending the timeline of projects, not from simply getting the application working, but from getting the business benefit or the business payback for that application. In other words, people have to use that application, and then change the way the business operates, or change the way the product is developed, or introduce a new product. So what that means for the CIO is both an extension of timeline and perhaps changes in accountability and the metrics that they're using, moving away from simply earned value and did I hit my deadlines, to have I actually made a measurable difference to the way the business operates. But also that means from a human resource and capital management perspective, you're needing to hire different skills. You're needing to hire business process experts. You're needing to hire almost internal consultants to use them within your own IT group in order to facilitate those changes that are really part of the value proposition, really part of making the difference in 2008. So in summary, this period of hyper-competitiveness that we're seeing in this region, the fact that the CIOs are moving from an internal focus within their enterprise to a focus on driving business results, in other words, interacting with real customers, real financiers, real legislators, is they require skills, they require human resource capital management techniques to develop those capabilities they need to have the people in place to deliver those new capabilities. So there's a big human capital management dimension to what's happening.